Hello, everybody. I'm Stan. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. Happy Tuesday to everybody. Happy Tuesday, you fine folks here. All right, so now, you guys remember, you rush right out tomorrow and get that recording of Stan tomorrow morning, right? You go right out and get it, right? Okay? All right, so I'm excited. I'm happy to be here. Grateful for the group having me tonight. I'm excited, man, because I'm sober today. I'm sober. And I want to welcome anybody that's new on here, right? And tell you, today can be the beginning of the rest of your life right now. Right now, if there's anybody new on here right now. And if you stay here, you'll find out what the joy of living is all about. You'll find out, but there's some work that has to be done, right? So my sobriety date is May 6, 1987. I haven't found it necessary to take a drink in 36 years, right? And I'm so grateful for that. And I get nervous all the time when I do this. And it's funny because my wife, she looks at me, she said, why do you get so nervous? And she tells me to pray and breathe. And she's not in AA. She's not one of us. She knows a million of you guys though, right? She knows all the slogans, all of that stuff. And what I do, I follow direction and I pray and I breathe. And that's how it is, right? So I'm sitting here, I'm nervous, you know, and we're going to get started. So I'm not going to, I like starting out how I got here right before I got here to you guys. I don't want to bore you with this long story, right? I like getting right to it. So 36 years ago, I was 25 years old. I was a bum. I had that one pair of shoes that had the holes in the bottom of them. I had that one pair of black pants that were so dirty, they were shiny. They would stand up in the corner by themselves, right? And I lived in a boarded up house with a handful of people. And at 25 years old, I was praying to die every day. Our book talks about that hopeless state of mind and body. I was in that hopeless state of mind and body. I wanted to die, right? And we all had a moments of sanity. And we don't know about that until after we get to Alcoholics Anonymous and we look back at our lives. And I had a number of them moments of sanity, right? But right here before I got to you guys, and I like telling this story right here. I remember a guy, we used to do all the wrong things out of this house. People used to try to break into this boarded up house because we were doing the wrong things. The police used to break into this boarded up house because of the wrong things we were doing. And I remember this guy came up to me one day and he told me how he had a gun and he told me how he could kill me and get away with it and nobody would know. I knew that to be true because I knew who he was and I knew the things that I had done. And this day, the reason why I like telling you this, because this day, I would love to tell you that I was being tough of how I was taunting this guy and telling him what he wasn't going to do with this gun. I would love to tell you I was being tough, but I wasn't being tough because that day, at that moment, I wanted the guy to pull the trigger because I wanted to die. I had lost all hope. I had lost all hope. And our book talks about that. So what happened is, I remember leaving this house that one morning, that moment of sanity that we have. And I remember leaving that house not knowing where I was going to go because I had nowhere to go. I was no longer welcome in my parents' home. But that morning, God saw fit for me to take like a 3-mile walk to my parents' house. And I didn't understand that then. I understood that after I got here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember taking this lonely walk to their house, knowing I wasn't welcome there. And I couldn't tell you the last time they had saw me. But I laugh when I say this because they knew when I was around, because there were many times where their house was broken into. They knew I was around because when they got home, their house was broken into. And here I was walking to their house. And I remember I found a $5 bill that morning. Now, I don't know what a $5 bill does to any of you on here, but I'm going to tell you, a $5 bill to this brain right here, chaos and confusion. Was I going to drink? Was I going to rob something to add to that $5? What was I going to do? What happened was I bought a pack of cigarettes. I made it to my parents' house. I stood on the step. I rang the bell. My dad came to the door and he opened the door that wide and he said, you know, you're not welcome here, which I already had known that. And I remember asking my dad, could I wash? And he told me if I came in his house, he was going to call the police on me. And I asked him, could I wash again? And he let me in the foyer of his home. And I watched him walk to the phone. Now, when you come in A, you hear about being sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I told you I was in that hopeless state. So whatever was going to happen that day was going to happen because there was just no more fight. There was no more running. There was no more anything left in me. And he went to the phone and he called my mother. He didn't call the police, he called my mother. And my mother, I'm a mama's boy. I tell anybody, I'm a mama's boy. And my mom said, give her boy some help. No matter all the stuff I had done, give her boy some help. See, what I didn't know that day is that my dad, growing up, my dad was an alcoholic. I had no idea that my dad had already been in Alcoholics Anonymous for 5 years already. See, he was in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. My mother knew that my dad could get her boy some help, right? So he made some phone calls to some of his friends in Alcoholics Anonymous. They got me into, and I remember going to that detox for 7 days and I didn't hear one thing. I remember that card they give you, right? And you fill out the questionnaire. I said no to everything. Total denial about my life. I couldn't get honest about anything, right? At the end of that 7 days, what happened was my dad came to get me. He had a bag. He had bought me a pair of sneakers, a couple of pairs of pants, a couple of shirts. And I could tell anybody, I just knew I was going to my parents' house. I just knew that's where I was going. That was it. I had no idea. I just knew I was going back to their house. He picked me up. He took me to a shelter and told me to continue doing what I'm supposed to do. I had no idea what I was supposed to do, but it blew my mind that I was in a shelter and wasn't going home with my mom and dad, right? But my dad knew he couldn't do it for me. I had to find my way. And I remember being in that shelter for probably about a week and a half. It might have been 2 weeks. And you ever watch the shows or hear the stories about sleeping with one eye open? That was me. I was in this shelter sleeping with one eye open, right? I had my little bag with my couple of pairs of pants and shirts in it, and I didn't want nobody to take anything from me. Here I was afraid somebody gonna take something from me. The thief I was my whole life before I got here to you guys. All I did was take. You know, I was that tornado in everyone's life. That was me until I got here to Alcoholics Anonymous, right? They had a bed for me. And I remember getting into this rehab. And I remember how we had to make in-house meetings, and then people were bringing meetings in. See, I don't know about you guys. I get excited when I talk about getting sober, man, because, man, whoo, I get excited. I get fired up, man, because I love my way of life. I truly do. I love it, right? So I remember hearing men and women share about this way of life. But I got to tell you, what blew my mind was there were men sharing how they felt. There were men that sharing what went on in their home. And then there were some men who were crying as they were sharing. That blew my mind. Because see, the way I was raised, a man didn't cry. A man didn't share his feelings, and what went on in your home stayed in your home. That's how it was. That's how we lived, right? Because see, I don't know about any of you guys, but when me and my friends came outside, we didn't come outside hugging each other, talking about, I love you today. Do you feel loved? Do you feel a part of? That wasn't the deal. It was about what are we going to do next, right? It wasn't all that lovey-dovey stuff. So it blew my mind to see men actually crying. Blew my mind. But I heard these men and women, they continued to share. And I started hearing people sharing about the joy of living, having peace of mind, liking and loving themselves. And there was a small part of me that wanted what you guys were talking about. And I guarantee you, as a teenager, if you would have asked me if I loved myself, I would have told you yes. I would have told you absolutely. But I had no idea what love of myself was all about. I had no idea. So I heard these men and women sharing. And I remember hearing this one guy share. And he talked about how he spent 14 years in the penitentiary. He talked about how they brought AA into the penitentiary to him. And the last couple of years of his life in the penitentiary, he got sober. And when you come to Alcoholics Anonymous, you hear people say, get someone who you can relate to, right? That's not what attracted me to this man. What attracted me to this man was he said a police officer was his sponsor. Blew my mind. Because see, growing up in the streets, you get locked up, the police, you don't want nothing to do with the police. A police officer was his sponsor. That's what made me ask that man to be my sponsor. I asked him on a Tuesday night, and he didn't tell me yes. He told me to meet him Saturday at a meeting. And downtown Center City, Philadelphia, it's a mustard seed meeting. And everybody attended that meeting. You hear that saying from Yale to jail. People right off the street used to attend this meeting. And that's where I met this man at. And after the meeting, we went down the street to the diner. And he sat me down. And he said the reason why he didn't say yes on Tuesday, he wanted to see was I willing to follow direction, right? See, when I came in here, and I know some people judge them old-timers, but when I got here, they used to tell you to shut up and listen. They used to tell you to keep it simple, stupid. Take the cotton out of your ears, put it in your mouth. They used to say if your butt falls off, you pick it up, put it in a wheelbarrow, and take it to a meeting. That's just how they were. And they would sit you down, and they would tell you why they're saying them things, right? So he asked me what lengths was I willing to go to. And I remember telling him anything. I had no idea what anything meant, but I just knew I didn't want to go back to being that bum. I just knew I didn't want to go back to living in that boarded up house. I knew that. And he looked at me and he said, it wasn't important if me and him became friends. It wasn't important if I liked him. As I stayed sober, that just became so powerful to me because that man cared more about me than I cared about myself. He didn't want anything from me. He just wanted me to stay sober and find a new way of life. That's all he wanted from me, right? And then he told me, he said, get a home group. And this is where it gets crazy because he said, get a home group. He said, get a coffee commitment. He said, there's a lot of recovery in the bottom of a coffee pot. And I got to tell you, people, I thought I picked a crazy man to be a sponsor because I had no idea what he was talking about. Recovery in the bottom of a coffee pot, right? I remember I had the home group. They gave me a key. I had to be there 45 minutes before this meeting started because we had them big hotel coffee pots. It took that long for the water to get hot. And what happened was you would get a couple of new people that would come in. And at this time, I was forced to say hello. I was forced to say hello to someone. And then you would get the old timers that come in and they just want to pluck your brain and just mess with you, right? And but it was my first introduction to service in Alcoholics Anonymous. Blew my mind. See, when I sit here today, that man was so right about how there's a lot of recovery in the bottom of a coffee pot because them conversations start around that coffee pot, them little tiny conversations, man, where you get to say hello. You get to say, how are you feeling today? You know, you get to open up just a little bit around that coffee pot, right? And then I have to laugh because, see, I was making coffee and people in AA, they tell you when the coffee's not good. They don't have a problem with telling you when the coffee is bad in a meeting. I got to tell you, they'll say, who made this coffee, right? And, but I was taught how to make coffee. And, but what happened was it got me involved in service. And then he told me I had to get a big book. And you hear me talk a lot about my dad because, see, growing up, I told you, I learned how to take it you know, that fake facade. I learned how to, you know, when I talk about being taught, a man isn't supposed to cry. See, my dad growing up, I was a punching bag on many occasions when my dad came home drunk. And, you know, he would tell me, you better not cry. And then there was them times when he would say, see, I also heard, I brought you in this world, I'll take you out of here. And there would be times when my dad would say, hit me back, hit me back. Now I was petrified. There was no way I was going to hit this man back because I thought he would kill me, right? But I learned early on how to take it. And that's just how it was, right? So he told me to get a big book. And this big book right here, right? It's the big book my dad bought me 36 years ago, right? It's a design for living, but it means so much more to me. It's so much because my dad gave it to me. And when I talk about my dad today, February 12th of this year was a year, it's been a year since my dad passed away. And he had 40 years last year. But when I talk about my dad today, because of God and Alcoholics Anonymous, I talk about my friend. I talk about how I miss my friend today, right? Because of you guys, me and him mended all of that stuff of growing up because I hated my dad growing up. It took for both of us to get to Alcoholics Anonymous for us to work all of that out. So I miss my friend today. So when I talk about this big book, it means so much more to me, you know? So we started, I got a sponsor and we started looking back at my life and looking at the powerlessness, and I'm not going to go too long into it because I like just touching on each one of the steps just a little bit of how it was for me when I first got here, right? So we look back at my life and seeing the powerlessness, I could tell you alcohol did some things for me in the beginning. It made me feel okay. It gave me that courage. It made me feel a part of. I remember we used to have our little house parties and I would be the guy up against the wall, petrified to go across the room and ask a girl to dance, right? Petrified. But what I found out after I had a drink, alcohol gave me that courage. It gave me that courage. It made me feel okay. And what happened was alcohol worked until it didn't work, right? Alcohol became the most important thing in my life. See, I was growing up, I was the guy who I felt less than. I was angry. I wanted to be like the older guys. I wanted to be, they were the cool guys. I wanted to be like the guys on the corner. They dressed good. They the same guys they used to harmonize and drink around the fire can in the schoolyard, right? I wanted to be like them guys. They were the #1 guys, right? But to be like them, I had to do the things they were doing. And they were doing all the wrong things. They were doing all the wrong things, but I wanted to be like them. So I had to do all the wrong things because I wanted to be the guy. I wanted to be the important guy because I felt less than. So I wanted that attention. I wanted to feel okay. So I did them things to feel okay, to be that guy. It's a funny thing about being that guy though, because when you left with self, you still feel like crap on the inside. You know, it's like buying that new dress or that new pair of shoes and the people are telling you how nice you look, how good it looks. And then the novelty wears off and you still left with self. You know, it's like dressing up the outside, but the inside feels like crap. And I did that many a times, you know, many a times, dressing up the outside, but felt like crap on the inside. And it doesn't matter how much alcohol I drank, I still felt like crap on the inside. I still felt like crap. See, it worked in the beginning until it didn't work, right? So as I started going through that first step and seeing the paralysis, I drank when I didn't want to drink. You know, there were so many things that occurred in my life where it was all around alcohol, all around alcohol. And so when I got here, it wasn't hard for me to see that first step of being powerless over alcohol. It wasn't hard for me to see that my life was unmanageable because I was a bum when I got here to you guys. I didn't have anything to manage. I couldn't manage my own life. I had nothing. And then we approached this second step. And what I found out was alcohol was just a symptom of my problem, that I was the problem. You know, I had to change. My thinking was distorted. You know, how I thought about myself, how I thought about you, and what I thought you thought about me. See, I'm one of them guys, before I got here to you guys, if you didn't like me, I would have had to find out why you don't like me and what can I do so you would like me. That's how less I thought of myself. The low self-esteem, right? So my thinking was distorted. So now I had to start believing this power could restore me to sanity. Because I always did the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. It was never like, I need to stop drinking. It was always, well, I won't drink what I had the night before, or I won't do this, or I won't do that. Like, and the results was always the same. Total denial about my life, about my alcoholism, right? And then here we are at this third step. And I got to speed it up because what I found out in alcohol is I can talk. I found I can talk, right? So here we are at this third step. And you know what? My mother had us in church all the time growing up and always believed there was a God, but I never had faith and trust in a God. And here we are at this third step. And my sponsor told me in the beginning, you know, pray for the obsession to be removed every day. And I was doing that every day, like he said. You know, at some point, something happened in a meeting. I realized I hadn't thought about a drink, nor did I want to drink. So something was happening. But we're at this third step and making this decision. And I remember how I struggled so much with this third step because I wasn't accepting God's plan. You know, I'm running on that simple prayer, just praying for the obsession to be removed. And things weren't moving the way I thought they should move or fast enough as I thought they should be. And I'm struggling with this third step, man. I'm struggling, you know. It's like God is saying this, I'm saying that, like I'm playing tug of war with God, right? I'm going to lose that battle every time because what happens is God lets go of the string and says, go ahead and hit your head on that wall again. But I'm here when you want me. I'm here, right? So here we are at this third step, and I'm starting to pray, and I talk about this third step because you know, I had to speak like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and before I had to speak, I heard this group came on, and some of you may know the group. It was called, the group was Jelly Roll, the group. And this song came on, and it talked about, I only talk to God when I need a favor. Who am I to expect a savior, right? It brought tears to my eyes, this song. And I listened to the song over and over again because, see, I was that guy who only called on God when I needed a favor before I got here to you guys. And the favors were, please don't let the police catch me because of the wrong things I'm doing, or please don't let these other people catch me because of the wrong things that I'm doing. I was always praying for a favor. Always. But not to let me change my life. It was just so I don't get caught. So here I am at this third step, and I'm learning some things in this third step. And now I approach this fourth step. And I thought that I was ready because you guys were telling me if I wanted to find out what being happy, joyous, and free was, I had to do some work. I had to go through these steps. So here I am at this fourth step. And I remember how I froze on this fourth step. And I remember after about a month, my sponsor said, how you doing? And I remember telling my sponsor, I'm okay. And I remember how he looked at me, and you know how your sponsor just knows all about you. And he looked at me and he said, when are you going to stop BSing, right? So he like cornered me. And I had to tell him that I was scared. And he looked at me, he said I was scared because I didn't have faith in a higher power that everything was going to be all right. And he was right. So here I go now. I had to start tapping into this power that you guys were talking about. I had to go back and start praying, you know, a third step prayer, our 7-step prayer. I had to go back and start praying for this guidance and this willingness for me to continue to move forward if I wanted what you guys were talking about. And that was freedom. I wanted freedom, bondage from self. I wanted that freedom that you guys were talking about. So I went back and I started praying and I started tapping into this power that you guys were talking about. And as I started to do that, something started to happen. I was able to move forward. And I remember before I got here to you guys, I had a lonely apartment because my oldest daughter, her mother had left me. And I like this story because I remember one day I was walking with a 6-pack. I had already been drinking. And I walked by this store and it had all these pictures outside this store. And you could have got from superstars to naked people. You could have got whatever poster you wanted. In the middle of all of this is just another one of them things that I can't explain, because in the middle of all of this was footprints in the sand. And I remember out of all these posters, I read Footprints in the Sand. I remember buying Footprints in the Sand, and I remember taking it to that lonely apartment and putting it up on the wall. And I remember at different points going up and reading it. I couldn't understand it. I had no idea what God was telling me. I had no idea that God was carrying me when I couldn't carry myself. I had no idea what God was trying to tell me, because I didn't have faith and trust in a higher power. I didn't have that. So we get into this 4th step, and I'm taking a look at myself. And I'm right, first time in my life, I'm putting pen to paper about me. And I really didn't see the need because I knew about me. I knew my life. I knew all the things I had done. But in this 4th step, there was so much information. And I remember going into the 5th step and my sponsor taking me out in the park, and we going over this 5th step and we discussing this stuff. And I remember it was so funny because I remember we went out in the park and he said, let's begin. And I remember here I was scared again because now I got to tell this man all this stuff, right? And I said, begin where? He said from the beginning, right? So we start talking. And I like talk. And what happened was, as we started to talk, I started to feel okay. I wasn't being judged like I would have been in the streets. Because see, I grew up not being able to tell anybody how I felt on the inside. I carried all that baggage with me. I carried all that stuff with me to you guys here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and here it is. I'm getting some of that freedom that you guys are talking about, just a little bit at a time. The longer I talk to this man, the more freedom that I was getting, right? After doing that 4th and 5th step, I didn't want to be that person that I was anymore. I didn't want to be that person, because now here we are at this 6th and 7th step. I wanted to be better. I wanted to be different. When I sit here today, I was always taught I might be the only big book somebody gets to see. What are they going to see? Are they going to see a man who's not drinking, who's still a liar, thief, and a cheat? Or are they going to see a man with integrity and character and love in his heart? See, I want them to see that guy. That's the guy I want them to see, the man with integrity and character. And in order for that to happen is I have to continue practicing these principles in my life. It's sometimes you sit in meetings and you hear, and I'm not talking about the new person that just walks in the meeting. I'm talking about sometimes you sit in meetings and you hear people say, I don't know how this works. See, I don't know what they're listening to, because we read it in just about every meeting. How it works is how it works. And the night you read the 12 steps, like it's laid out for us. It's right there. How it works is how it works. It's just, are you willing to do the work necessary to be happy, joyous, and free? I got to tell you, 36 years later, I'm still willing to do anything necessary to be happy, joyous, and free. So we get into this 8th step. I got to speed it up. I told you I can talk. I got to speed it up. So we get into this 8th step, right? And my sponsor threw me through another loop. He said, put everybody you know on the list. Just put everybody you know, right? And that threw me through a loop. But he was right. Because as I started to look again, I had all the information from the 4th and 5th step. But here, I was looking back at my life and like, again, I was that tornado in everyone's life. I was a thief. I was a liar. I was a cheat. I was a thief at a young age. And that never stopped until I got here to you guys in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I had to put all of that stuff down. I had to put it all down. You know, and I love about the 8th step. See, if I did an 8th step right now, I would get A's and B's. I'm not that person that I used to be 36 years ago. You understand what I'm saying to you? I would get some A's and B's, right? And that's because I'm practicing principles in my life. So we get into this 9th step, and I'm trying to rush because I'm going to be running out of time. We get into this 9th step, and we talk about making amends. And what I would like to say real fast, and I always like to touch on this, that house that I told you that I stayed in that was boarded up, there was a woman who used to stay there with a 10-year-old child as well. No sooner than I got into that rehab, that house was firebombed. And that 10-year-old child was one of the people that died in that fire. It still saddens me to this day. And I know some of you may will say, well, Stan, you weren't there for a couple of weeks. I know I wasn't. I don't know what they did or what they didn't do. But what I can tell you is that people wanted to kill me before I left there. What I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is to take responsibility for my actions. That's what I've learned here in Alcoholics Anonymous. What I've learned here in Alcoholics Anonymous is I can't point the finger on me being an alcoholic for my attitude, my actions, and my behaviors today, because I don't drink today. I don't drink today. I have to take responsibility for my actions, right? There's no more pointing the finger, right? And I learned that here in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? So making amends, that's one of the people who I can't go to and say, I'm sorry, how can I make it right? Even though the 9th step is way much more than that. It's about me changing my old way of thinking, attitudes, and behaviors. So I don't have to continue apologizing for the same thing over and over and over again, right? But I did have a chance to make amends to that. That I rode by that house. I prayed for that child. You know, and my sponsor always tells me I'm not that person today. And I know I'm not. But it doesn't mean that I don't get sad, because, see, as a direct result of our attitudes, our actions, and our behaviors, we affect everybody around us. We affect everybody. And that's just an example of that little child dying because of our behaviors. So it still saddens me. You know, I talk about sponsorship a lot because I've always had one. And my first sponsor sponsored me for my first 18 years. And he passed away with 38 years. And I got to tell you, I like saying this because I hear people that talk about they like their sponsor. I did not like my sponsor. I did not like the man. The man was never on my side. I don't know what to tell you. He was never on my side. I would argue with the man. He just didn't agree with me. You know, my way of thinking just didn't work, right? So I went out and I got another man. That man has been in my life for my next 18 years because I had 36 years now. And I don't like that man either. You would have thought I got smart or something and would have picked somebody who was a little, not less hard, right? But I got people in my life who love me enough to tell me the truth. And I'm so grateful for them. I'm so grateful. I don't like them, but I love them dearly. So this 9th step, I've learned some things. I'm not the person that I used to be. And we get into this 10th step, and I take this daily inventory. And I like taking this inventory. Like, I don't have nothing. My sponsor knows my life. There are people on here that know my life. You know, talk to all the time. You know, they know my life. Like, we share our lives together. And I like talking about this inventory. And I like to And it's not really a joke, but if you have a maid or somebody, you can go to them and ask them, how are you doing today? And they'll tell you exactly how you're doing today, right? I go to my wife and I tell you, she's not in the program. She has no issues, right? But I go to her. And the reason why I say this is I can go to her and say, how am I? And the reason why I tell that story is there's no fear of me going to my wife and asking her how I am, because I know how I live today. I'm not out doing the wrong things today, right? I don't have that problem with going to her and asking her that. See, she might tell me I could be a big baby at times, yeah, or I'm a pain sometimes, but that's the worst that I'm going to hear from her, right? I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful. She knows where I'm at. She knows what I'm doing. I don't have anything to hide today, right? So I'm grateful. You know, I pray all the time. I pray all the time. And I told you about that group that I heard. I'm not the guy just asking for a favor today. I pray constantly. I want to grow. I continue to tap into the power. You know, I continue to talk to God. I know I don't walk alone today. You know, I make a meditation meeting all the time, and I like having that quiet time. I like sitting back, you know, and taking that pause out of the day and tapping into the power. You know, in service, the 12th step and carrying this message, I learned so much by having a sponsor. I learned how to be involved in service. I learned how to extend my hand to that new person. I learned how to go out on 12-step calls to help another alcoholic who was in need. Since I've been sober, I have always been in service. And I was taught detoxes, rehabs, and prisons. And that's what I was taught to do. You know, like I said, my first sponsor spent 14 years in the penitentiary. So it was important to him that we got involved in institutions. And that's what we did. You know, and I'm so grateful for that. You know, I learned how to be there for someone else unconditionally by having guidance of a sponsor. So what I want to tell you is about my oldest daughter before I wrap this up. Another one of them things that happen here in Alcoholics Anonymous. My oldest daughter grew up not calling me dad. Her mother had left me. I told you that lonely apartment that I was in. And I remember it didn't bother me while I was drinking, but after I got sober, it bothered me, of course, because I deserved to be called dad. That's what I thought, right? And I remember how I used to go to my sponsor and I used to argue with him because I used to want to go to my daughter and argue with her and hurt her feelings just so I would hear what I wanted to hear. And that was for her to call me dad. And I remember how my sponsor looked at me and he told me, allow God to be God. I just suit up, I show up and do what a dad is supposed to do. I'm so grateful for sponsorship because, see, without a sponsor, left up to my own devices, I would mess everything up. And what happened was that miracle did happen. She started calling me dad. But something more even happened. And I always say 18 years, this is a little over 18 years now though, right? And I always share this story because it brings me joy. On Christmas, my daughter gave me a big box with a bow tie, right? And in this box, I could see, I'm opening up the box real slow. You know, I'm happy to get a gift, right? I'm just happy. We all happy to get gifts. And I'm opening it, I could see it was a knitted quilt. And what happened was I was blessed to be able to start my own company since I've been sober. So I could see like it was engraved tools around the perimeter. And my daughter was saying, Dad, you got to open it up. You got to open it up. And I'm thinking it's a gift. See, what I didn't know is she wanted me to see what she had engraved in the middle of this quilt. So after I got it out and I unfolded this quilt and let it roll to the floor and I held it out, right? Because of God, AA, and all you guys in my life. See, in the middle of this quilt, it stated, the greatest gift I could ever have came from God. I call him Dad, right? This was a child who grew up not calling me dad. But because of all of you guys and me practicing principles in my life, the miracle happened. See, it's so much more than just putting down the drinking here in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's just so much more, right? Because you can put down the drink and still be crazy in here, right? I had to do the work in order for that to happen, in order for my daughter to see the change in her dad, for her to accept me like that in her life. You know, it blows my mind. And I'm gonna share this because I think I have, do I have a minute? Okay. All right. I had this quilt in the box for 18 years. And I was talking to my friend, she's on here now. We were talking one day and she, again, I share my life with people on here who I haven't had a chance to give a hug to yet. And she said, one day you're going to be gone and they're going to be looking through your stuff and they're going to see this quilt was still in the box, right? She said, wouldn't it be nice if they saw the quilt, she saw the quilt out and you were using the quilt, enjoying the quilt? Didn't cross my mind because I was busy wanting to hold on to this quilt, right? Nothing to happen to it. Bells went off. And I remember after she told me that, I took it out the box. I even took a picture and sent it to her. It's out the box. And I remember taking it to my office, putting it on my office chair, right? The child who I told you about that grew up not calling me dad, she runs my company, right? So it's in my office. She sees this in the office, in my chair. It brings joy to her, right? So when I sit in my office chair, it's like God and my daughter holding me when I sit in this blanket in my chair, right? The miracles that happen here in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? My first Christmas, my mom and dad gave me a key, little box. I got some box stories. They had a bow tie on it, right? I opened up the box. It was a key. It was a gold key. I was highly upset, people. I had a year, still self-centered. You know, I thought it was diamonds, pearls, something in this little box, right? It was a gold key. I didn't get it. It took for me to go to my home group that night for the older members to tell me the miracle that had just happened. My parents gave me a key back to their house where I wasn't welcome. Blows my mind. That's because of you guys here in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? So I think my time has run out. So what I want to say is my cup used to always be half empty before I got here to you guys in Alcoholics Anonymous. I sit here today, my cup is not half empty. My cup is not half full. My cup overflows with gratitude and joy. So I want to thank you guys for having me here tonight. Much love to everybody. Thank you so much.